Many memories I have are not only the hikes with Don, but some of the things that, that we or you have done, outside of Daily Ranch. Maybe Don wasn't there, but they wouldn't have happened had not Don gotten this group together. And I think that's very special. Personally, I would never have hiked most of the Pacific Crest Trail if I hadn't met somebody here on one of the first hikes with Don who told me about hiking the Appalachian Trail. I wouldn't have done I wouldn't have done Mount Whitney. I wouldn't have done some of the iconic hikes in the West if I hadn't heard people like Tom Kettering and Bill Sherrard and an example that Don Parnell gave about these more challenging hikes. And what I've done pales in comparison with a lot of other people, but the point is, wouldn't have happened if I hadn't shown up here with Don. And I'd also like to sing out the praise of some of the people that have sort of, you can't replace Don, but have like Don has taken the time and effort and energy to organize hikes, to volunteer, to lead hikes, and I single out Bobby and Bill Sherrard for what they've done. I appreciate that, and I've enjoyed hiking with you guys. And then there are, the memories that I'll have of some humorous episodes, incidents. I shared it on the trail this morning, and you indicated that there's some things should not be told here. So I will not identify the woman that used to be a core member of the group that told me one time at the tail end of the group that she had one time been a topless dancer. True story. I will not tell of the famous words uttered by one of the people present here on Mount Whitney when during a key element, never would I thought that I would hear these words shouted at the top of the lungs from Mount Whitney. I'm spreading my legs as far as I can. True story. I would not have learned about extreme couponing had it not been for Coupon Dave. And there's many other things. I would not have heard about the dragonfly researchers up there that were doing skinny dipping up in one of the ponds here on Daly Ranch. I would not have received perhaps the most profound life guidance I've ever received while trying to deal with a personal issue. I was told, just do the right thing. And that was appreciated. I'm still trying to figure out what the implications of that are, but I wouldn't have gotten had I not met this group. Something I came to appreciate largely through Don, I appreciate women more than I ever did before. And not that I didn't appreciate women before, but I mean, what I really appreciate is how damn tough women are. And I will say that I think that women in general are tougher hikers than men. They persevere more, they're more dependable, and I salute you ladies. And I also will say, just let's go to your head, that they can do dumb things just like men can, and they can pass gas just as well as men can. I apologize. That was probably one of the things I said. I think one of the things that I appreciate about Don is something that I sensed. He talked about so many things and they were so enjoyable, but he didn't talk a whole lot about his personal life, his past personal life. And I think that was partly a sign of his humility and the fact that he didn't like to talk about himself. Maybe just wasn't that kind of guy, even though I think he had a very accomplished life. But, I always sensed that he'd had some rough spots in his life. And maybe some things that happened that he'd regretted and that he wouldn't have done over again. I think that applies to all of us. But what always impressed me about Don, one of the things I think I respected the most about him was this sense that with the background, some of the things he'd worked his way through, that he was looking forward, he was out there with a positive frame of mind, he was leading other people. He made a lot of us feel better about ourselves. He did that for me. I felt better after I took one of these hikes. I felt better being outside. I felt better meeting some of the people in this group, even though I know some of these people have got whacked out political views on both the left and right of me. But I like these people. I like these people. They're good people. And at a time like this in our country, I think it's important that we remember things like that. It's a good group, a good group. And, you know, I will leave it to Rick to draw any metaphors for life based upon hiking and Daly Ranch. But I do have one. Don knew movies, too. So one movie that occurs to me, and this is a very limited comparison, Don, I apologize. Forrest Gump. Okay. He was no Forrest Gump. But there is this scene towards the end of the movie when Forrest is running all around the country. He's been running for a couple of years. And suddenly he stops. And all these people are behind him. And he's like, now what? Holy hell, what do we do? Well, thanks to Don, we know what we're going to do. We're going to keep moving, one foot in front of the other. We're going to keep going. We're going to keep hiking. And there's no doubt in my mind that we're going to see Don out on the trail. So, that's it.
Thank you, Jim. The reason I asked Jim to be our lead-off batter, right after Don passed away, and I mentioned it to Bobby, and she said she would send out an email to everybody who'd hiked with him that's on the hiking list. And then I said, well, I don't know if Jim is going to get it because he's out of town. He's up in Portland, so I will call him. So I called Jim, and for me, he had something prophetic to say that really resonated. He said, you know, Don created and provided opportunities for us to do things that we never thought we were capable of doing. And that really resonated with me, and I said, for no other reason, we need this sharing time. Just for that very reason, because Don did create those opportunities and he provided them himself. Jim mentioned about diversity of Don's knowledge. When Don found out I was a teacher and we would go out hiking, he would say, Rick, make up a list of 10 items. You pick the topic. I said, okay, so I would pick, because I was a political science major, first one I picked was political science. And met him on the trail and says, you got the 10 questions? Oh, yeah, I do. So we'd walk along a couple of miles and he'd say, okay, Rick, what's the first question? And I'd throw the first question out there and there's this dead silence. And Don would turn to the group. Anybody have an answer? No, Don had the answer. Yeah. So then we'd hike a little further. All right, Rick, you got your second question? Oh, yeah, here's the second question. I'd read it off. We'd walk. Anybody have the answer? Nothing. Don had the answer. It didn't matter. Every time we hiked, I'd pick a different topic. Esoteric topics that I thought he couldn't possibly know all these answers. And yet he did. That was the diversity of his knowledge. And Jim mentioned about his musical interests and musical abilities. It is no secret he hated Barbra Streisand. She can't sing. He was adamant about that. That was Don. You know, he had an ear for music. And Jim, you did mention I do like metaphors, and you can see at the bottom of this one, and this is from Wayne Dyer, not Rick Dreyer. Yeah. Nature provides a virtual smorgasbord of miracles. Don introduced those miracles to us out here at the ranch. It took me forever to learn what the monkey flower was. Yeah, but I learned it from Don because the ranch was his resource, and he shared that resource openly with all of us. Well, the next person you heard me mention, she and I have now done 426 hikes. I'm hoping that we do 427 soon, but we save the 428th for next month because my 75th birthday is on 4/28. So maybe we can do our 428th hike on 4/28, my 75th birthday. Bobby, come on up.
Well, thank you, Rick and Jim. I think you said it all. Took the words right out of my mouth. So anyway, I can share with you what I have experienced with Don. I moved to this area in 2004, met him shortly after that, after I heard all about Daly Ranch. Well, you gotta go hiking with Don. Gotta go hiking with Don. And I said, well, who is this Don? So I showed up at one of the hikes, and I could not believe all the people that showed up. There must have been over 50. And from then, I started sharing hikes with him, his marathon hikes, his progressive hikes. He would start out with the progressive hikes. He would start at the 25 miles. You do that in 5 days. The second one, he'd do a few months later, it'd be a 50-mile hike. We did that in 5 days. And then we went on up to the 75-mile progressive hike, and we did that in 5 days. He was going to do a 100 one, and I don't know what happened with that. I think his knees started really bothering him then. So we never did get to the 100 progressive hike. You know, I enjoyed every single hike with him. I would come home, even after the marathon hikes, just energized. I could just keep going. He just kept us so uplifted our spirits. He was just great to hike with. He knew every trail in here backwards and forwards. He'd probably hike it blindfolded if he had to. And what I appreciated, in fact, was I wanted to stay up close to him so that I could get in what he was saying about that plant. And he knew the Latin name, everything about it. To this day, I can't go out on a hike and I'll look at this plant and I say, oh no, I can't remember what that is. I wish I could ask Don. He could tell us, he could tell me. And I really got the appreciation for all the beautiful plants that he would point out. So, and what I also liked about Don was all of you guys. He introduced me to all of you guys, wonderful hikers. I enjoy all of your company. And from then I started taking people on hikes, and his name always comes up in a hike. Oh, remember Don when he did this, and we went on this hike and that hike? So he really touched my life, and I just, I'm gonna miss him. And Diane, I'm sorry for your loss. It was a loss to all of us, and I really appreciated him. So without further ado, Rick, back to you.
Thank you, Bobby. In Diane's opening remarks, she said Don knew every trail, he knew the distance on every trail, and of course that was reflected in the outlines he gave us before every marathon hike. Bobby mentioned the inspiration of people, 50, 60 people who would come out for his marathon hikes, and Bill Burke would come down as he was preparing to hike Everest, and he said, this is part of my training hikes, doing hikes with Don here at the ranch. Diane mentioned at the very beginning that he knew every inch of this land. Well, he subsequently trained and worked with Bill Sherrard. And Bill Sherrard wanted to make sure that this was an exact science. So Bill Sherrard put out this book which details, see, Don went down to tenths. I think Bill went down to hundredths or thousandths of a foot. But anything you wanted to know about this ranch as far as distance, elevation gain, you know, there's even a couple places on Jack Creek Meadow where there's elevation gain. Well, Bill Sherrard lists all of this, and he even put together a DVD to go with it. Yeah, if you're a real visual learner and the book doesn't do it for you. So Bill has followed in Don's footsteps, and every week, except for the first Saturday of the month, Bill Sherrard leads hikes out here. So we are all successors of the influence of Don. Bill, would you come up and share some of your thoughts?
I last saw Don the day before he passed away, and I was glad I was there with Diane. I first met Don on a hike with Jack Pomeroy, who was here early in the early 20s. And Don come jogging up, and I wondered where he came from. And he said he jogged all the way from La Honda, and I thought that was pretty fantastic. He had to go all 5 miles back, up trails and down trails, and I was pretty impressed with that. I did a marathon hike with Don, 2 of them in fact. First one we started in the daylight, and as you know, we finished in the dark. And we got back to the parking lot, we'd only done 26.1 miles. And there was somebody in the group named Jim Garish who insisted that we walk around the parking lot for 1/10 of a mile so we could officially say we'd done this. The second one I did with him, we did down at Caballo entrance, and it was his birthday party, and we had a good celebration there. And I did a couple of progressive hikes. I did the 75-mile one. I think that was the last one he did, and he was proposing 100, and I don't know if that ever came off. But on the 75-mile one, there was a guy hiking with us that was 89 years old, and he finished all 5 of those. He had 5 days of 15 miles each, and he finished those. And that was another hallmark of Don. He kept track of people and saw that they all finished. Lastly, I met Don with a gal from Pendleton, and he says, "Why don't you join us on the hike?" And I found myself jogging, so finally I just gave up. And later on I found out he was doing a speed walk. And, lastly, I have a little story that I wasn't going to tell, but the ranger said I should do this because it's one that you'll enjoy. When I first became a docent, the first hike I did as a docent, the only person that showed up was Don. So the two of us were hiking together, and I had a radio in my backpack. And we were doing a creek crossing, the one down by the entrance. And he said, "Let's hike up through the brush up to the trail up above." And I said, "Well, that's off trail." And he said, "Oh, they'll never find out about it." Well, it turns out to get up there, we had to crawl on our hands and knees, and the brush opened my backpack and out fell the radio. And so I got up the top and I said, "My God, we lost the radio." So I said, "Well, let's go back and find it." Well, of course, we don't know where we went. We're crawling underneath bushes. So finally we decided we'd come up with a story. So we told them we heard somebody yelling help, and we cut across country. That went over real big. And then the superintendent became a little upset, and so he said, "Well, what are we going to do about the radio? We got to find it." And I said, "Why don't you put some music on it, and we'll go trace the music." And he said, "Leonard goes out to the highway patrol as well." So they never did find the radio, but in a discussion later on, I got kind of excused because I was just beginning. Don and Tony, the superintendent, got in an argument, and Don quit and went over to the Elgin Forest, and I hiked with him there several times, and he came back and everything was normal. And I missed Don at the time that he quit hiking, and I still do.
Thank you, Jeff. Well, I was going to share the story about the nude couple in the Mallard Pond, but Jim has already alluded to that, and I want to thank Andy. She was the one that put the dragonfly outside, but I will finish the story, Jim. After Don told us the story, and I thought he and Sue were hiking, it turns out, and I found out just yesterday, it was one of the rangers named Robert. They related the story to Sue, who got a big kick out of it. And I said, "Well, all these years, I've been thinking it was Sue." Well, after that incident, Don shared it with us, we decided on Don's marathon hike, the birthday hike, we were going to give him a shirt, which you see here, an identical shirt that I'm wearing, with a dragonfly on it. And we did. My wife's an embroiderer. So she got a nice shirt, a white shirt for Don, and embroidered a dragonfly on it. And Andy came up with chapstick. We put dragonfly on chapstick, a visor with a dragonfly, and Don became the director of advanced dragonfly research. So every time we go by Mallard Pond, that story resonates and it comes back to us. Well, you were telling stories on the hike this morning, but there's one story you didn't tell, and probably one story that many of you don't know about. And it has to do with this, a keychain. You see, this property has expanded. 1993 is when the ranch was purchased by the city of Escondido. It was a 3-2 vote, and Marie Waldron, who is now our assembly person from this area, Marie was the swing vote that bought this land so that we would have a place to hike, a park, the central park of Escondido. Well, the city of Escondido kept adding property, and there was a piece of property that we now know as Stanley Peak, which was in private ownership, but it was landlocked, no access to roadways. So the city did purchase that. So once that was purchased, Don, and as Bill alluded to, would do things that were sometimes if he got caught, someone would slap him on the wrist. He said, well, Rick, they just bought Stanley Peak. I'm going to go up and show it to you. It wasn't officially open. So we went up there and looked at it, did it a couple of times. And he said, but we got to come back on October 21st, and the year was 2006. They're going to have a special ribbon cutting. So we went out for a hike, and we were probably about 8 miles into the hike. And we get to the bottom of the hill. All the city council members had been driven out there. They cut the ribbon. And to this day, Diane and I don't think that any of them hiked up to the top of Stanley Peak. You know, they take off. But they did the ranch-provided lemonade and cookies. And they had a Girl Scout troop and a Brownie troop. And they were there at the trailhead. And when we came up, this one little girl, about 8 years old, looked up at Don and said, I just hiked to the top. And if you can hike to the top, you'll get one of these. Do you think you can hike to the top? It cracks me up thinking about this 8-year-old girl looking at Don, and Don turned to her and said, well, we will give it the best effort to get to the top. So this is my remembrance. Every time I go over to Stanley Peak, that jumps out at me, that young girl. But this is what they gave away. If you got to the top, you got a keychain on that day. So it says, I made it. And then it says the date, October 21st, 2006. But Don introduced that to us long before that Girl Scout was out there in the city. Had just purchased it. That was my concluding story. But I've opened it up, as you can see on here. It says volunteers. You've heard from some of the people who previously said they did want to speak. Jim asked for an hour and a half, and I told him an hour and a half would be inappropriate if he could just kind of cut it down a little. So anybody.
You're approaching an hour and a half.
See that, and Jim said, you know, we all have different political views, you know, but we all somehow get along. Who else would like to share something of their experience with Don? This is for Diane, a remembrance. It looks like Bill Newsom is making his way to the front, and Bill was on those hikes and met his future bride hiking with us.
I can cross that part off.
I needed a segue to you, Bill.
Yeah, thanks. And Diane, thanks for, and Rick for organizing this and setting this all up. I first met Don, and to meet Don was kind of a strange way to phrase it, but I was on a hike here in 2007 in the spring, and I was there was a guy, and his name began with an L. I can't remember his name, Lang or something like that. He was the bird guy. He was remember the guy who was the bird specialist that led hikes, began with an L? Anybody remember that? Real soft-spoken, nice guy. So he's leading, and I recently retired for the second or third time. And he's leading a hike that had been advertised, I think, in the Reader. And we're doing the slow stroll and pausing and listening to birds and strolling and listening to birds. And all of a sudden, here comes an M1 tank and an orange Under Armour shirt just powering at us, you know, and right by us. And a grunt and a nod and didn't even stop. And I said, who's that? And this guy Lang said, oh, that's Don Parnell. He's a little intense. You don't want to hang with that guy. And of course, I said intense. If you remember at that time, I had hair down to here, a pair of $12 shoes. I used a branch, and I had my shorts looked like they had been cut out of a tablecloth. So I said, no, I like intense. So I found Don, and I started hiking with him back there in the spring of 2007. And I had a tree branch because I refused to get hiking poles. I thought that was anathema, that, you know, if I have to use hiking poles, I'm going to check into a nursing home. I refused to do that. And yet, I couldn't keep up with him because he was a four-legged beast and I was a two-legged beast. And even though he had 30 years on me, the guy was just a machine. And something that I mentioned earlier to Diane is I never saw him stumble. I never saw him trip or stumble or fall. Think about that. He never tripped. The guy was the most sure-footed guy. you ever met. Unlike many of us here, I used to roll my ankles. Some of us even had helicopter deliveries from our falls. Just saying. But not Don. I mean, Don was a tractor. He really was a tractor. And it didn't matter the terrain or the elevation or anything else. He was sure-footed, and I knew Don's back better than I knew his face. And it was beautiful, because I could just follow his back and never get lost. And the beauty, to this day, if you dropped me in the middle of Daly Ranch, I would have to call Clark for search and rescue. Help! Because I just followed Don. I never learned the trails. I never knew where I was. I just followed Don. It was beautiful. You could set your thinking aside and just enjoy walking the trail. I remember a particular day, though, that he decided to venture away from Daly Ranch and take me to Del Dios. And he took me up the backside of Del Dios. Have you ever done that? It starts off with just this ridiculous elevation. And, by the time we were halfway up the hill, I was furious. I thought this was some kind of a really miserable gag he was playing on me to try to climb this thing. And if I could have kept up with him, I would have hit him with my tree branch, but I couldn't keep up with him. But that was some of the best training I'd ever done, was climbing up that hill. And to this day, I love hiking up that thing. And I eventually got rid of the branch, and I got a couple of walking sticks, cheap, Walmart. And of course, the thing about Don is he actually had a great sense of humor and a rapier wit. And other than Diane, everybody was a target of his wit. You might not have been there when he was giving it to you, but he was. But he would give it to me, and he'd say, "Oh, it looks like those are those recycled beer cans. Those are your." So I had recycled beer cans for poles. That's what he always would tell me. But we were all targets of his wit, and it was all in good fun. We enjoyed it. And of course, as Rick alluded to, on one of those famous Del Dios hikes in 2007, as we went to the peak and started coming down, there were two women at the bottom coming up, and it was Bobby and Offie. And that's the first time I met Offie, and the rest is history. And Don was the best man at our wedding, too. Oh, there was one administrative detail I forgot to mention. I was supposed to say something nice about Garish, so he would return the books that I lent him. So that's it. But also, to echo on something Garish said, Don's knowledge of things was precise and deep and fascinating. He was a man of few words, as you said. You took the words out of my mouth. But when he did speak, you wanted to pay attention because it was stuff worth remembering. So I learned so many interesting things from the guy, including, the stuff about flora and fauna. One of my favorites is this, and I brought it with me. And I use it to this day sometimes when I'm in groups discussing the wonders of nature. I don't know if anybody recognizes that. Anybody Oak apple. That's an oak apple. Oak apple. Also known as the Gall apple. Gall. Right. And it's just a magnificent phenomenon in nature. And Don explained it to me that this wasp called a Gall wasp plants its young in the branch of these oak trees out here. The tree recognizes it as a parasite and exudes this container, which wraps around the embryo of the wasp, which the wasp did on purpose because this actually provides the cocoon for those little critters. They grow and they escape, and then they begin their life cycle after that. So, here's some symbiosis that's just astounding. And it was one of those things where hanging out with Don, I would have never known about it except for Don. And of course, he knew many other things, a lot of them in Latin, and he and I did a lot of hikes together, just the two of us. And he would open up a little bit more than he would in a crowd. And I learned many fascinating things from the guy. One particular hike, he actually opened up everything pertaining to the origin, destiny, and purpose of the universe and our race. And it's actually in Latin. It's qui postulavat Deus suppleverant. It's the answer and the meaning and the purpose and the design of reality itself in time and space. You should have been there because he explained it to me. Sorry, I'm not going to share it with you. You had to be there. Does anybody know what the word dives means? Dives, D-I-V-E-S, Dives. It's Middle English from the Latin. And he explained that one to me, and it's magnificent. Sorry, you had to be there. I'm not going to explain it to you. If you miss the hike, you miss the hike. And again, I think the thing I enjoyed most about Don, in communicating with Don, was the elegance of his language and how he enunciated when he spoke. I mean, you swear you were at a Shakespeare performance when he was speaking. And every now and then he would break into song. Rarely, but every now and then. And it was just a joy. I mean, there was a joy inside Don that was just wonderful and fabulous. And like I said, yeah, and that. Oh yeah, and like a child, like a kid. And when Bill was telling the story about sneaking up off trail, I can't tell you how many times he would say, "Hey, let's go off trail." Or I wonder if we pushed that big rock up there, whether we could get it to fall down. That was. I'm sure right now he's pushing a big rock somewhere. I wouldn't doubt it. But as much as he would tease and everything else, Diane, his concern for you was phenomenal and enviable. And it's a role model for me with Afi, how his concern for you. And he just worshiped you. And like I said, he teased the rest of us, not you. You were the sole pedestal, no question about it. Don was also a Marine, as Garish mentioned, and he was also a traditionalist, but in the good way. He was not a square at all. And in that sense of tradition, I wasn't at the ceremony of his funeral or anything else, but there's a great prayer that's offered for Marines and Navy personnel at their demise and decease, and I want to pray it right now. And if you'd like, you can pray it with me or just listen. It goes like this. Unto Almighty God we commend the soul of Don Parnell, our brother departed, and we commit his body to the deep or the ground, in sure and certain hope of the resurrection unto eternal life, through our Lord Jesus Christ, at whose coming, in glorious majesty to judge the world, the sea and the earth shall give up her dead, and the corruptible bodies of those who sleep in him shall be changed, and made like unto his glorious body, according to the mighty working whereby he is able to subdue all things unto himself. Our loss, heaven's gain, looking forward to being with him on those eternal trails. Thanks, man.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, anybody else would like to come up and share something for Diane? Other than what you've already written out, and Andy has provided those cards for you to put down some of those thoughts. But if there's anything that has not been mentioned that you would like to mention, this is your opportunity time. And then Diane is going to give some closing remarks. Michelle Rupert?
I only have one thing.
Ah, see, I knew it.
Since you singled me out. I met Don once or twice, but I know specifically once through Bobby and our group. It was one of his birthday hikes, I think in 2007. And everybody has their turn with him to chit-chat. You know, everyone kind of cycles through and chit-chats with them. And so it was my turn. And we talked about a lot of different things, from the military to plants, because I was thinking about becoming a mission trail guide, and I did become one. Probably because of him, because of his enthusiasm. I'm like, if he can do it, I can do it. So I eventually did it. But I found when I was with him that I was running. The whole time I was doing this. And I would say, you know, everyone's back there. And I actually saw his face versus his back. But the whole time I'm like, don't you ever slow down? The whole time I'm running and carrying on a conversation. And it was wonderful, because that's how I met Bobby. That first hike, I ran the whole time. And when she sent the email to me, I was like, yes, I want to be there. Because I felt in that time that I was with him at that hike, I understood all the stories that were shared, because he had that passion, that love for people and the world and God. And everything. And I felt it just in that, that 5 or 10 minutes. And we went to the peak, and I remember sitting with him and just chitting, like I knew him for years. And I think that's the light about him that wanted me to be here today. I mean, just in that one hike or two, it's like I knew him for a lifetime. So he's much loved, very, very much missed. And thank you for this great opportunity to be here, because I wouldn't have missed it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just make a quick concluding remark. The importance of what we do is mentioned by the former Prime Minister of Singapore, who said a concrete jungle destroys the human spirit. Nature restores it. That's why we're out there. And Don impressed us with that very thought. Diane would like to make some concluding remarks.
Thank you, Rick. I'm very touched. Thank you so much for coming here and sharing what you shared. And I'm getting goosebumps. That was one of the things that attracted me to Don, was he knew so much about so many things. And we had been married. We didn't get married till we knew each other 10 years. So we didn't rush into anything. But one night, we were living down in San Diego, we had a couple over, and I think we'd done the zoo together or whatever. And Don started talking about klezmer music. Klezmer music? I didn't know he knew about klezmer music. And they said, what is it? And he went on to explain the Hebrew background of klezmer music. And I was just sitting there, and I thought, I've known him 10 years or more, and I didn't know he knew about this to that extent. And he was just like that. He was just a fascinating person to be around. And I'm glad he could enrich your lives, and he certainly enriched mine. So thank you so much for being here.